Anthony Nitsos likes to joke that he and Michael Crichton of Jurassic Park fame have something in common. They're both top medical school dropouts, but the other guy clearly made a lot more money from his move. Yeah. Fast forward many years later, after careers in manufacturing process improvement, he's a Six Sigma black belt, large-scale ERP implementation executed during the Y2K crisis, controllership of a Japanese company which scaled 10x revenue in 3 years, founding a yoga studio, and now fractional CFO for dozens of SaaS startups, including working with 2 unicorn exits. Anthony now spends his time as CEO of SaaS Gurus, a one-stop shop for all things SaaS finance and accounting. SaaS Gurus specializes in automating and optimizing every operation it can inside of startups to help them to set them up for rapid scaling, cash flow maximization, and value maximization using a unique blend of medical, manufacturing, IT, and finance skills backed by a SaaS-specific strategy. So, and then while he's not advising clients, he's a husband and father of 2, plays classical guitar and judo, and is set on learning 9 foreign languages. So basically, Anthony, you just sit around, you don't accomplish much, you don't do much, you're a pretty lazy guy, huh?
Yeah, I just am a couch potato. I really like watching MTV all day.
I love it. I love it. So listen, before we get further into all those great things you've done, the background, the deals we're going to talk about, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing at least the far majority, if not all of those things on that list probably was not it back then, but you tell me.
Not a single one of them was on that list, I'll tell you that. I'm trying to think, 10 or 11. I think about that time I wanted to be an astronomer. I think that was probably when, the phase when I was like, black holes are cool. And, I'd watch the space launches, the Apollo program. Yes, I'm old enough to remember the moon landing, so I was part of that age. And then, of course, the 1970s come along, everything goes sideways, right? And we stopped going to the moon and it was crushing. So it's like, I think I wanted to be an astronomer then.
Love it. Love it. And one other question looking back, what was the first deal of any type you remember doing? Could have been something small when you were a kid or early in your career or whatever comes to mind.
I think the first deal I would have to say is, sadly enough, my father passed and he had a partner and there was a buy-sell agreement. And I was a complete noob. I had no idea what this stuff was. I was, my father had put me in charge of his estate, when he passed. And so I had to all of a sudden come up to speed with, hey, what's a buy-sell arrangement? What's an insurance payout? How do you go about valuing a company? So that was kind of like my baptism in fire. I think I was all of 26 years old when I got thrown into that. So I would say that was probably the first deal that I was involved in.
Wow. Tough circumstance learning. Yeah, really.
Yeah. I mean, I had basically, had previously dropped out of medical school, right? I was retooling my career. I had gone from medicine to manufacturing because I guess they both started with M, and I was in Michigan. And so, yeah, I was like, oh, what's this? Oh my God, I got to deal with this. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
Wow. So one of your early experiences was to, I think I said 2 unicorns, but you worked at or involved with one. Talk about sort of that ride, what your role was, and what kind of, I'm sure you talk unicorns, it must have raised capital, what was the exit, all that kind of stuff.
So in the case of Duo Security, that was the one where I was there for about 3.5 years. I came into the company, we were in 8 figures revenue at that point, and we would go to 9 by the time I left. Yep. The CFO there, who had been, in and around the VC space, the tech startup space for a number of years, was looking for somebody to come in and basically just run and scale the back office operation. And with my ERP background, my controller background, my manufacturing process engineering, he came across my LinkedIn site. Hey, there you go. Those things work. Right. I was literally in his backyard almost, because we were both living in Ann Arbor, and of course Duo's based in Ann Arbor. And long story short, he hired me to come in as basically the senior director of finance to essentially scale everything that I could in the back office in order to obviously enable the company to achieve this massive growth, which it did. So that was really kind of the second time I'd gone through what I call a 10x scale. The first one being the Japanese company I worked for, where we 10x'd the revenue in 3 years. That was in manufacturing. Here I was doing it again, only now it was for and a venture-backed company.
I love it. And let's talk a little bit, because, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, whatever stage they're at, that's the dream. At least they think that's the dream at some point, right? To create a unicorn and have it scale and raise, venture money and whatever. But, there's some very specific things around that journey that one make it not appropriate, or for many companies, but also that sort of changed the dynamic. I mean, as an executive at a company like that, what does it mean to have that kind of financing and that kind of growth rate, and the expectations of that kind of growth rate from your investors?
Well, how, Peter Parker's uncle said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So the term I came is with great influx of investment comes great expectations, right? If you get a C round or a B round, the level of what are you going to do and how fast are you going to get that ARR up, that becomes, all encompassing and all consuming. Yeah. In the case of Duo, I joined after the C round had been closed. Okay. So this was now to the point where they had completely figured out decoded the DNA of the sales process. So all they had to do was pour more money into the sales operation and the marketing operation to get more deals. And that's kind of like, to me, that's the first step of, climbing Mount Everest is you got a company, you start it, and, by happenstance, you get some contracts, right? And then, you're CEO, so you're lead cook and bottle washer, you're doing the sales, you're doing the operations, you're doing the finance, you're doing all this stuff. And eventually you start hiving this stuff off to other people. But ultimately, what you have to do is you have to come up with that sales playbook and that marketing playbook that says, we pour more money in here and more money comes out here, right? In terms of deals. That's a critical stage for startups, is if you kind of happenstance along to the point where you got enough revenue coming in, but then you got to sit there and figure out, okay, how do I turn this faucet on, right? Yeah. And that's kind of the break point. I've seen so many companies struggle on those rocks and they just, crash and burn because, it's been the CEO. They're the best salesperson. They're the champion. They know how to sell it, but then they have to turn that over to somebody else. And that's a big stumbling point. That's the point where a lot of companies just break down and they cannot get through that. Duo had figured that out. And so when I came there, it was now, okay, we are now going to really launch this thing into orbit. We need somebody here to basically help build the rocket, which in the back office rocket, not the front office rocket, the back office rocket. And that's where I came in because I had the ERP experience. I'd had the systems reengineering experience. I knew my way around finance and accounting. I'd been working for SaaS companies since 2007. So I knew, what the story was, and that's where it took off. And that was an interesting journey because this is where I came up with the term tech pile.
Okay.
We're all familiar with tech stack, right?
Yeah.
What your tech stack is. But with these startups, what I noticed, and this was really apparent with Duo, is that, okay, we need a payroll system. Okay, let's go get one. We need an accounting system. Okay, let's go get one. We need a CRM. Okay, let's go get one. We need a CSM. Let's go get one. And what happens is everybody's doing their own thing and everybody's getting their own software. But the problem is there's nobody in the background sitting there architecting how is this all going to fit together and work in a smooth, easily accessible manner where everything is integrated, where it's like, okay, who's got the customer list? Well, finance has got one. Okay, sales has got one. Customer success has one. Marketing has one. It's like, okay, they all don't agree. Yeah. What you don't want is that tech pile, right? Which is you got all these lumps and all these piles of, you remember the movie WALL-E?
Yeah.
Remember that? Remember all the piles of garbage that he's like trying to organize? That's the image that comes to my mind when I think about a company that's made it that far, right? Because you can make it really far without these systems working. But then you get to this point where that's holding you back.
Oh, yeah.
Because you just can't get the information you need, whether it's finance information, whether it's KPIs, SaaS metrics, it really doesn't matter. It's so much work to get it out that by the time you get the information out, 2 months have passed or a month have passed and it's stale information. So I come from a background where you want everything instantly coming to you. It's all in one system. And so that's where I came up with the term, this is a tech pile, right?
It's totally good. Yeah, it really brings two things to mind for me. The image that I had was, you have an orchestra, right? And there's a reason there's a conductor, right? Mm-hmm. Without a conductor, if you had the violinist playing Brahms and the pianists playing Mozart and the horns playing Bach or whatever, right? Like it's, they're all good music, but
it's chaos.
Doesn't work together. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
And then the other thing that I thought about was Les McEwen's book, Predictable Success, where he calls that stage where, you get to the point where you have this opportunity to scale, right? In the beginning, it's, startup, you're hustling. Then you get to this little stage he calls fun, where, hey, things are starting to work. People are starting to buy the product. Okay, we can deliver it. It's cool. But then, if you get to that next stage, where there's volume, before you hit what he calls predictable success, where you do need teams and systems and processes and everything to work together, he calls that stage whitewater. So that's the...
I like that term. That fits. Yeah. You're going really fast and you just don't see the waterfall that's coming up.
Exactly.
You're moving so fast, and then the next thing you know, you're over it, and it's like, oh.
Yeah. You're just reacting and you whatever, and there's nothing.
And inevitably, these things break down when you're about to go through some deep due diligence for something.
Right.
That's where really, like, all of a sudden, the pain really comes to the fore. It's like, hey, we got to, like, if you're ever acquired by a public company, that's probably the worst due diligence you'll ever go through, because they have hordes of people who do nothing but sit there and try and find things and look for stuff. And so the lists of stuff that they give you is just like literally pages and hundreds of lines long. That's even a B or a C round due diligence are pretty intense. A rounds, not so much. Seed rounds, not so much. But you start getting into the B and C range where you're talking 8-figure, 9 figures in some cases for the investment. Well, they don't want to just kick the tires. They want to disassemble the card, see how it's put back together, and make sure that you did the job right. If you don't have the back office systems put together, and it's not just the back office systems, it's really the metrics, right? Because that's what they're looking for, is they're trying to benchmark you and say, okay, are you better than, the average Joe? Are you actually exceeding, what you should be for your industry? Well, they can't do that unless they have an apples to apples comparison using your numbers versus what they're seeing either in their portfolio or their, their industry standards that they're using, whatever benchmarks they're using. And that's where the stuff usually hits the fan, right? It's like, oh, we got to produce this. Well, who's got it? Inevitably they're going to throw it to some poor finance schmuck who's got to sit there and wade through, thousands of pieces of data to try and put it together, doesn't get to sleep for 3 weeks, and then comes out, bleary eyed with a report, and then it's wrong. Right. It's like, we got to go back and do it again. You don't want to be screwing a deal because you don't have the right numbers. I mean, that's just like the worst thing, right?
No question. And, one of the things that listeners have heard me say on this podcast previously is that, you talked about these hordes of people who come in looking for what's wrong, right? They have to understand the mentality, so it might have been at the executive level, the decisions made to do the deal, but the people who are doing the due diligence, their risk is that they miss something. Their risk is that the deal gets done and something turns out to be a problem and they didn't find it, right? So they're actually looking for reasons very often, whether it's in the finance folks, the legal folks, the whoever it is, right? Looking at the people looking at the contracts and systems, the people, and whatever, they're actually, some of them are even, hopefully most of them have good mentality, but their job is to find stuff that's wrong, right? And some of them would be much rather find something that's wrong and have the deal not go through, because that makes them look like a hero, than certainly miss something and have the deal go through and then it falls back on them. So you got to keep that in mind, which is why I often talk, to clients about doing that pre-due diligence in every way. You should go through an internal due diligence process in anticipation of any kind of deal to try to, get you best position.
I would even go further. When we first engage, some of our clients we engage with are really like pre-seed in some cases, right? Yeah. You got 5 people. Some of them are further along the path. And the first thing I do when I walk in is I say, where's your data room?
Yeah.
Right. Almost the very first question, where's your data room? Why? The reason why is I need it. As the CFO coming in, the first thing I need to do is find out where are all the skeletons buried, right? Where are all the corpses? But more important is I'm looking at it to say, I'm going to assume that you're successful. And there's going to be some day where there are going to be 5 CFO types coming in to look at your data room and check all of the work that's in there.
Yeah.
So I started really early. I don't wait. It's like part of part of our onboarding process is specifically setting up the data room. It's like, give me all your customer contracts. I want all your employment contracts. I want every financial report you've ever produced. I want all your board minutes. I want everything. And it's like, typically it's like, oh, well, we have those. Sure. Yeah, we've got them all. Yeah. And it's like, okay, show me. Well, Joe's got those. Okay. Well, Jane's got those. Okay. So, and then, some are in DocuSign, some are in G Drive, somebody's got a Microsoft Teams account with SharePoint, it's scattered all over to 5, 6 different systems. Go back to, oh, that's your tech pile. I get it. So let's start. So really all kind of ties back together, because in the end, it's the person, the organization that can produce the things most easily, most accurately, most efficiently. Those are the ones where this stuff doesn't get in the way.
Yeah, got it.
Doesn't get in the way.
All right. So you've alluded to it, and we talked about it in the bio, but I want to give you a little time to talk more specifically about SaaS Gurus and, what you do now, who the clients you work with, and, more specifically.
We work with tech startups, right? They're almost all venture backed in some areas. We do have some bootstrappers. I mean, they do exist, and we've got a few that have reached, 7-figure ARR that, without any outside investment. Those are the interesting ones. But inevitably, when we come in, I go back to you mentioned the fact that I had a yoga studio. Yeah, core strength. We all know about core strength when it comes to yoga. I talk about the finance core, because in the end, your finance operations, your sales operations, and your HR operations, those 3 pieces, if they're not synchronized and working really well, you're going to have problems. Yeah. Sales operations, quote to cash. How quickly can you get from a quote to a sales close to an invoice, right? How many times have I seen, hey, we got the order, and then 3 months later, we're still waiting to invoice the client. It's like, what that, is going on that it's taken this long to get to revenue. So getting that quote to cash process, or, hey, we got the invoice out. Well, it's been 90 days since we've sent it out. Nobody's paid it. So who do we call? Oh, I don't know. Well, who did you send it to? This email. Well, AP at. Okay, that really does me a lot of good, right? So, or, yeah, we've got HR, we got HR. Sure. Yeah, we got contracts. Where's your IP assignments? What's that?
Right.
Oops. And for your folks that don't know what that means, is when you have developers and folks that are putting your code together, unless they assign the rights to that code over to the company, they could later come back and claim that it's theirs, right? So you want to make sure that's protected. Benefits package. This is a competitive market. You need to make sure that you got competitive benefits. And then there's the whole finance and accounting piece. Does your financial system look like a SaaS company? I can't tell you how many times, Corey, the last person you should ever have set up your accounting system is your tax CPA. That is the last person. I mean, if nobody else is left on the island and they're the only one standing, maybe that's what you do. But I can't tell you how many times that I've walked in and the first thing we take a look at is, okay, show me your financial report. Show me your P&L.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got wages all in one line. Hey, that's great. What's your gross margin? We don't know. I'll tell you, in SaaS, that's probably the second most important metric after growth is what's your gross margin.
Right.
So when we come in, it's always a cleanup. We got to get the financial system cleaned up so it's giving us the information we need. The next thing we do is we come in and we put in a cash forecast. In the SaaS startup world, there are 2 metrics that matter. I don't care what anybody else says. Cash runway and sales growth.
Yeah.
Everything else is detail. Yes, CAC is important. Yes, gross margin is important. Yeah, I get all that. But if you don't have enough cash to make it to the next round, none of that's going to matter. And if your sales aren't growing fast enough, nobody's going to invest in you. So it's like, if you really want, if you get nothing else, if your listeners get nothing else out of what I have to say today, make sure you know to the penny when your cash is going to run out, and make sure that you have that go-to-market strategy figured out so that your sales are growing, because without those 2 pieces, you're not going to make it. So that's what we focus on. We focus on really getting them set up. All that P&L work and all that financial forecast work, the main thing that I'm getting out of it is when I just did earlier today, sat down with a, very brilliant founder who's come up with a fantastic idea. It's an AI-backed solution. And, they just got a seed round, $2 million. When is it going to run out?
Yep.
Right? First question, when's it going to run out? Okay, well, we got some work to do.
Yeah, and that, it's just such a different game than other types of businesses, right? Because, it's not, you're not going to look at traditional P&L, profitability, numbers in the beginning for a while, right? Because money's...
Well, you can't spend net income.
Well, that's right. Right.
You can spend
Money's
cash.
getting thrown back into growth. The whole thing is about growth and scale. You might even be starting out with some sort of freemium model or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Where there's no revenue. There's a million reasons why those businesses are evaluated differently. So yeah, they need to be set up differently, and the numbers that you get access to and what you focus on. And you're right. I mean, it's a lot of these founders, right? They don't. I mean, especially if you're talking about a first time founder. They haven't played this game before. They have no idea. Maybe they've worked at someplace else. But even when they have, if they're, let's say, tech oriented or they're sales oriented or whatever it is, they've probably never been involved in the finance side, even if they work.
No, as a matter of fact, they probably skipped those accounting classes in college because they thought of it as like the bubonic plague. And I get that. All right. It's totally understandable. No, you did not grow up to be a founder CEO. You did not become a founder CEO so you could do the accounting or the financial planning. And you're right. The first time founders, those are the ones they've got the brilliant idea. Okay. They're the golden haired stepchild, whatever it happens to be. And they've got some piece of software that everybody wants to have, but, they don't want to look stupid, right? Because there's these high expectations. But I had this conversation with my son the other day. He's like, Dad, how, because he's getting to the point where he's curious about what Dad does. I'm trying my best to dissuade him from this to work, but that's okay. But what I see, he said, so how about the ones that succeed, the successful ones? He said, what makes them different? Mm-hmm. I said, the easiest way to explain it is they know when they don't know something, and they hire the right people to come in and do it.
Yeah.
Right. It's the ones that are micromanagers. It's the ones that have big egos. Those are the ones that aren't going to make it, because the micromanagers are too busy in the details. They get too bogged down in the minutia, and they can't pull themselves out to look at the big picture. Yep. And the other ones, they have too big of an ego in order to understand that, I really don't know how to do this stuff. Or even if I do know how to do this stuff, that's not where I should be spending my time.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was going to say on that second point. I'm a big believer, and people have heard me talk about this podcast, and, highest and best use. Like, you should be focusing on those areas that you are just the rock star in, right? Your special sauce, whatever you want to call it. There's a million names for it, but where you're great at it, you're passionate about it, nobody else in the company can really do that. That's where you should be spending your time. And even if you're capable, every minute you spend on something that's not that is costing the company. So 100% agree.
Yeah. And the CEO of a tech startup, they need to be pushing sales, whether it's out there evangelizing the product, whether it's podium time in front of some trade group, whatever it is, they need to be out there making sure that the sales are growing. And in the back, when the doors are closed, they're looking at the cash to make sure that they know when they have to go out and do the next raise.
Yep.
Right? Because what I tell everybody is, if you have a cash forecast that shows you running out of cash in December, you're in trouble, because nobody does a deal in December.
Right.
If you don't have a term sheet in your hand by Halloween, you might as well forget about it, because nobody's going to be paying any attention to you once Thanksgiving, once November starts rolling around. And so all of the cash for you, everybody's like, really? I said, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. It's like, you need to put a cash forecast together, and you need to make sure that you have cash at the end of December to carry you into the first quarter, because you're either raising in Q3 and wrapping it up, or you're going to be raising in Q1, because you might as well forget about trying to raise in Q4. Just forget about it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And listen, having an understanding of cash. I mean, listen, if anybody knows about the startup world, there are countless examples of good companies who had great ideas, concepts, or even had some traction, who ran out of money, right? Yeah. Whether it's, because of poor cash management, whether it's because they happen to they needed to raise and the capital markets dried up for external reasons or whatever it is. So that's where a lot of companies run into trouble. I mean, yeah, some of them, the product doesn't prove out, there's not market fit, whatever it is. But some of them actually, if they only had more money and more runway, they could have made it.
Well, those are the sad cases to me. It's like, you've got a great product, you have a great team, and you just didn't pay attention to the thing you needed to, which is your runway. That's why I've learned over the years, is the first thing I come in when I take a look at it is, where's your cash now? What's your burn look like? I can get to that number pretty quickly in like a matter of a couple of days, just based on, even if it's a garbage accounting system, I can go to the bank account and start doing some calculations, right?
Yep.
But that's not a scientific way of doing it. That's just, I can brute force it because I've been doing this stuff for a long time and I've got a sense. That's the first thing I look at is like, oh, you have that much in the bank? The last 3 months you've burned this much? Based on what I'm saying, you're going to run out of cash in the next 6 months. Are you in a raise motion right now?
Right.
And it's like, oh, yeah. Oh, all right. We've got to get to work. So what SaaS Gurus does, what we do is, we go in there, we fix that finance core. That's the first thing we do. And as a part of that, there's a tremendous amount of illumination that comes out. The light bulbs go off. Oh, I had no idea that was going on. What do you mean we have 5 CRMs? It's like, one CEO was like, what do you mean I have 5 CRMs? I said, there they are. Because I had no idea. It was a 50-person company. So it was getting to the point where, it wasn't keeping track of everything. But that's just throwing money away. I mean, there's no reason for that. And then once we're there and we're working it, then it's the strategy. That's the fun part for me. It's like, how do we price our contracts? Do we do implementation fees or do we go pure SaaS? It's, in this market, how do we go about actually getting the contracts to close faster? If you're dealing with large enterprises or you're dealing with healthcare networks, it's a 6 to 9 month sales process. I don't care, right? It's going to take that long. If we bring a salesperson in, what's the ramp we expect? Those are the kinds of discussions that, I like to get drawn into and spend my time on. And in order to get to that, we need to really automate everything up to the controller function. Mm. And that's really what it's all about for us is, and I think that's what sets us apart from some of the other firms that do this work is, I come from a Japanese manufacturing background where you wanted everything as efficient as possible down to the nth degree because we're trying to squeeze every ounce of profit out that we can, especially if it's automotive manufacturing. You want to talk about cheap? Sorry for the automotive manufacturers out there, but I know your secret. Yes, you're trying to be as cheap as possible in the back office. So that I told you about that. You mentioned that scaling company. Yeah. Well, the mission I was given was we had to scale the company 10x, and the 3 people that I had working in the back office with me were the only 3 people I was allowed to keep.
Wow.
So basically we had to 10x the volume of all the data, all the financial transactions, all the planning and everything else, but I couldn't hire any more people because the G&A margin simply could not grow. It had to shrink.
Yeah.
And so that was my first real baptism in terms of scaling to make sure that, okay, how do I set this thing up so that all of this information is coming to me in as automated as fashion? Now we're talking 15 years ago, 20 years ago for that. The technology has advanced so much.
So much, yeah.
It's so much easier to automate this stuff now, right? Yeah. Because everybody's got an API, everybody's got an SDK, everybody has a way to plug in, play just about everywhere. And if you can't, go buy Zapier because it can plug and play just about everything, right? So there's so many tools out there to automate this stuff. There's no excuse for you to have to body up your back office in order to get numbers. There just isn't.
Yeah. No, it really makes sense. And it's funny how, I don't want to be one of those guys who's like, back in my day, it was like, but like, I even remember, this is a tiny example, but I remember when I first launched my law firm in 1992, we had servers and hardwiring, through the walls into the office when we were building out the office and all. And then in 15, I had gone into a partnership, split up and, restarted my own firm. And we were up and running with 5 laptops and an internet, right? And at $600 a month in cloud programs, right? And obviously, at a tech startup, it's a little more involved, but the difference from what it was to now is of similar scale. It's just, but you still got to listen. You still run into the same problems when you go out to companies in that it's easier. It doesn't mean that they do it or use it, or that it's integrated or whatever, right? I mean, it should be easier, but they're focused on other stuff still, right? In a lot of cases.
That's that tech pile problem. Now, it's because the technology there's so much more out there, it's actually easier to get into trouble.
Right.
It's like, because there's such a breadth and depth of all these applications out there. And, the other thing too, is that I think where we really help our clients is we've already sorted through that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I already know what the solutions work and how they work and the ones that work best, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve it, that's not their job.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have time to go out there and figure out what's the best, accounting system, what's the best SaaS metrics system, what's the best, quoting system. Those are the things that they look to me to say, okay, Anthony, what are they? And I'll say, okay, here's the ones that we work with. Here's how we put them together. If you follow this, you'll get this result.
Yeah.
And I like to do it in a way where it's easy for me to plug and play, where it's not so much the software itself, it's the underlying data structures, right? If you've got the data structured the right way, it's easy for you to pull it out of whatever system you have it in and plug it into the next one. So people ask, well, when do we have to go to NetSuite? No, when you're about 100 million. What, you can run QuickBooks up to 100 million? I said, I have run QuickBooks up to 100 million. It can handle it. Now, whether you want to do that, that's different, but you can do it. It's actually capable of performing at pretty high speeds. But if you don't have, say, the chart of accounts set up correct, then you're going to have to redo all of that, right? So when we're I'm setting them up, like I said, from day one, I'm setting them up for a unicorn, right? Why not? It's easy because, about the story about the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, right? Mm-hmm. And now we have all these networks that are sitting there watching the skies looking for asteroids. And the reason why we're looking for them is we don't want these things falling on our heads and wiping us out, right? And it really bothers me when I read these stories about, there's this big rock that we only saw yesterday that's going to pass by the Earth tomorrow. It's like, boy, we dodged the bullet on that one. I would rather see that thing out at the orbit of Pluto, right? When we can maybe do something about it. And that's in reverse how I look upon these things. It's like a little bit of change right now can have a huge impact later. So a little bit of proper setup now when this company is small can have a big benefit later when you're going to plug and play and replace QuickBooks with NetSuite or Intact or whatever you're going to use. Or I'm going to use PandaDoc today, and then I'm going to go to, I don't know, whatever the new CPQ is, but that's the one we happen to like because our clients are small. But, you start off with HubSpot and move to Salesforce. Well, that's very easy to do if you set up HubSpot right.
Right.
Not so easy to do if you didn't.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I think this whole discussion is one of those areas where, the impact on ability to get deals done, on valuation, on, whether you're raising capital, whether you're selling company, whatever it can be so significant and it's so overlooked. Like that's not what most founders are looking at as drivers of value. Obviously, sales growth, all that stuff is going to be, more important. But if you are, if you're a mess on the back end, whether it's in due diligence or whether it's affecting the ability to grow or, make strategic decisions or watch your cash flow or all that stuff is, I think, so underappreciated in terms of the ability to be successful, build value, and have more interested potential parties to, on the table in deals that won't fall apart, in due diligence. I just really think it's way more important than people think it is.
Yeah, some of our best clients are the ones that have gone through this before, right? So you talk about the first-time founders. They have to have the right mindset to bring in an expert to help them with this stuff. Somebody somewhere got the message through to them that, no, this stuff is important and you need it. Could be the VC that's bringing their money in to say, hey,
right,
I know you don't have a lot of experience in finance. We need you to come in and bring in a fractional CFO. Even though you're early stage, they can really help you out early. If nothing else, they can answer a lot of, what you call dumb questions like, how much insurance should I have? Or what kind of insurance should I have? You think about all the different things that you need to run a company. And you and I take these for granted because we live and breathe this stuff. But for somebody who's just come out of whatever, and they've got the new whiz-bang idea, they may not know the first thing like, oh, I have to have unemployment insurance. Right. It's like all those little things that can come back and bite you. So there's real value to the ones that are first-time founders, but the ones that have been through it once or twice before, and they know that they need this stuff, now they're looking for the person who's got the expertise to come in and do it.
Yeah.
Not somebody to come and invent it, but somebody who's done it before, because I go back to this a lot. Tech startups are not the place for on-the-job training. Maybe the CEO is the only one who gets to do that because they're the founder and it's their brainchild. But you really, large organizations, you can bring somebody in who's new to train them up, they can help be mentored, they can be trained and whatnot. But in a tech startup, when you have a 10-person crew, a 5-person crew, a 15-person crew, 20, maybe once you start getting into 30 and 40 people, it starts to change. But below that level, you need to hire people that have done it before and know what they're doing, not hire some, hey, this guy's really sharp and he's a friend of mine and, I really want to give him a hand. That's great. I understand that. I'm human too. And I have the same temptation, but in the end, you got to do what's right for the company. And what's right for the company is hiring the people that know how to do what you need them to do in order to get you to the next level. It's like Mario Brothers, right? It's like you got to get to the next level. Well, you got to beat the big boss in order to get to the next level. Well, you can't do that with some, noob schmuck that doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah. So do you get referred in by some of the VCs at times?
Yeah, board members who worked with us and seen what we do, they refer us in. VCs refer us in. Yeah. Other CEOs that have worked with us refer us in. We get almost all of our businesses by referral. It's folks that are familiar with what we do. I'm doing a little bit more outreach now and, actually getting like some outside marketing myself. But, it's been really busy for us because it's not that big of an industry where once you get a name established, people say, oh yeah, these guys over here, they know what they're doing.
Sure.
They'll go hire them or go talk to them. And we have a pretty easy process for getting to know clients and figuring out where they go. The first thing I do when I sit down with somebody after that kind of initial discovery call is they're a good fit. So I said, look, I'm going to give you a free audit for an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. You and I are going to sit down. We're going to dive through every system that you have. I've got a whole set of questions. And at the end of 90 minutes, I'm going to have a pretty clear idea of where we could go with this. And I don't charge for that because it's me getting to know them.
Yeah.
And they get to know me in the process too, just based on the kind of questions I'm asking. And inevitably, I'm giving them some advice, right? Something's going to come up in that audit, say, hey, I see you're putting $50,000 on implementation fee for a $50,000, SaaS contract. I said, what if you were to drop that down to $15,000 and take that extra $35,000 and add it to your SaaS contract over 3 years? I said, that'll change your multiples overnight. The light bulbs go off. I mean, it's an easy example, right?
Yeah.
So, but you'd be surprised how many times I find that. Because if somebody told me, say, hey, you got to charge implementation fees up front, it's easy cash, you get it in the door now. I said, yeah, there is a temptation for that. I said, but do you know what the valuation multiple on services is versus the valuation multiple on recurring revenue?
Exactly.
Right? I said, when you go into your next round for investment, which pre-money valuation do you want to have?
Yeah. And, it is that mentality shift. Often I talk on this podcast about the mindset of a deal maker, right? There's a mindset shift. And, this concept of thinking about how every decision you make in the company is going to affect the eventual deal, whether it's a capital raise or an exit or, whatever it is a mindset shift. And so it takes that mindset shift, takes that desire and willingness and ability to hire the right people and then to be able to get the right information and make those strategic decisions. But, I'm always a believer without the mindset shift first, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, you have to, like I said, the successful ones know when they don't know and don't have a big enough ego to get in the way to go out and say, hey, I need help here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I ask you my final two questions, any last thoughts on lessons, issues that come up, ways, these companies do it right, anything we haven't covered? I'm sure there's a million things, but anything come to mind that you want to mention before we close out here?
I'm just going to reiterate, it's cash runway and sales. I mean, I have to come back to that one. And there's so many ways where that manifests itself that, we could go into lots of rabbit holes, but in the end, it comes down to those two. You got a check from an investor. Now you got to figure out how to spend it. Plan it. Don't do it by the seat of your pants. For goodness sake, sit down with somebody who knows how to do a financial projection and actually do it right. Because you download some Excel spreadsheet from who knows where, right? Hey, this is a financial planning spreadsheet. Let's download it and use it. Okay, that's great. How do you measure your actual versus budget if you haven't married that thing up to your accounting system? All right, so I see, hey, we've got an accounting system over here that our tax CPA set up. Right there tells me what I've got. And we got the spreadsheet that we downloaded from the MIT website for startups. I said, that's great. but you got apples and walnuts. Right? They're not even both fruit. Apples and walnuts, right? Unless you have those two both working together in a seamless fashion, you're not going to be able to plan.
Yeah. Good stuff. So, Anthony, if people want to find out more about your services, where should they go?
Well, I have this really almost unpronounceable Greek last name, Nitsos, Nitsos, right? There are so few of us out there that if you just Googled my last name with Anthony in front of it, you're probably going to find me. The easiest way is SaaSGurus.io, SaaSGurus.io, SaaSGurus.io. You'll find us. Or find me on LinkedIn, Anthony Nitsos. I'm probably the only guy named Anthony Nitsos out there on LinkedIn. But those are the easiest way. And, our webpage has a contact us that comes directly into my inbox. I make sure I answer those quickly because I don't want people to wait. And I don't want to wait, right? You send something in there, say, hey, I'm interested in your product. And 3 days later, somebody gets back to you. It's like, yeah, I already bought your competitor's product.
Right.
Because you're too late. And those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent. My final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from all people around the world, from oppression to why I'm an entrepreneur and haven't had a boss in decades. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Freedom to me means the ability for me to be able to do what I want without harming anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can help other people get happier. Because to me, I asked he's listening in the other room right now, I asked my son the other day, I said, how do you know if you're successful? How do you measure success?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks, well, maybe it's a lot of money. I said, that's a measure. I said, but to me, the measure of success is, are you happy doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
And are the people around you happy? Right? Because in the end, you can have all the money in the world, and when you die, you're not taking it with you.
Yep.
And if you believe we have a soul and that goes on to the next level, then it's your memories and how you treated people and how you feel about yourself. That's the only thing that you get to carry to the next level. So are you happy? Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I did the right thing? That's what's important.
Love it. Anthony Nitsos, thank you for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you, Corey. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate it.